Karen claimed I built illegally. My great-granddad's Civil War grant shut her down in court. Have you ever faced a neighbor so determined to ruin your life that they dig through history to prove a point only to be spectacularly proven wrong? That's exactly what happened when Karen, my entitled next-door nemesis, tried to tear down my family's legacy with a single vicious accusation. It all started on a crisp autumn morning in rural Tennessee, where my family's century-old farmhouse stood proudly on a sprawling plot of land. I'd just finished renovating a small barn in the backyard, turning it into a cozy guest house for visiting relatives. The barn was a relic from my great-grandfather, Ezekiel, a Civil War veteran who'd been granted the land in 1865 for his service. It was a labor of love, restoring that weathered structure, and I was proud of the work-new cedar beams, a sturdy roof, and a fresh coat of paint that gleamed under the sun. But Karen, my nosy neighbor with a penchant for control, had other plans. Karen marched over one day, her lips pursed tighter than a lemon, clutching a stack of papers. "You built that illegally," she declared, pointing at the guest house like it was a crime scene. "This land's zoned for residential use only, and that's a new structure. I checked the county records, and you didn't pull a single permit." Her voice dripped with smug satisfaction, as if she'd caught me red-handed. I tried to explain that the guest house was a renovation, not a new build, and that our family's land had unique historical protections. But Karen wasn't listening. "I'm reporting you to the county," she snapped, "and I'll make sure they tear it down." The truth? Karen had been itching for a fight ever since I declined her suggestion to join the neighborhood HOA she'd been trying to form. She wanted to dictate everything: fence heights, lawn maintenance, even the color of my mailbox. When I politely refused, citing my family's long-standing independence on this land, she took it personally. Now she'd found her weapon, a zoning technicality she thought would bring me to my knees. What she didn't know was that my great-grandfather's Civil War grant wasn't just a family story, it was a legal fortress. I spent the next week digging through dusty family records in the attic, pulling out yellowed documents tied with twine. There it was, the original 1865 land grant, signed by a Union official, awarding Ezekiel 40 acres for his service in the Battle of Shiloh. The grant included rare provisions, exempting the land from certain local regulations due to its historical significance. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a shield, one I'd need when Karen's complaint triggered a county investigation. The county inspector, a no-nonsense woman named Marla, arrived a few days later. She was thorough, measuring the guest house, checking permits, and reviewing zoning laws. Karen hovered nearby, arms crossed, smirking like she'd already won. "You'll see," she called out. "He's breaking every rule in the book." Marla, unimpressed by Karen's theatrics, asked for my documentation. I handed over the land grant, along with letters from the State Historical Society confirming its status. Marla raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued, but said she'd need to verify everything. Karen's smirk faltered, but she doubled down. "That's just old paper," she scoffed. "It doesn't mean anything today." Then came the twist I didn't see coming. While I was preparing for a potential court battle, my cousin Lena, a genealogy buff, uncovered something explosive. She'd been researching our family history and found a newspaper clipping from 1866 in the county archives. It described a dispute between Ezekiel and a neighbor man named Hiram Whitaker, Karen's great-great-grandfather. Hiram had tried to claim part of Ezekiel's land, arguing it was unfairly granted to a Union soldier in Confederate territory. The court ruled in Ezekiel's favor, citing the federal grant's ironclad legitimacy. The parallels were uncanny. Karen, like her ancestor, was trying to undermine my family's rightful claim. History wasn't just repeating, it was screaming. Armed with this revelation, I faced Karen in court a month later. The county had escalated her complaint to a formal hearing, and Karen was there, flanked by a lawyer she'd hired to push her case. She argued that my guest house violated modern zoning laws and demanded it be demolished, claiming it devalued her property. Her lawyer even suggested I'd forged the land grant, which drew gasps from the small crowd of locals who'd shown up to watch the drama unfold. I could feel the tension in the room, thick as fog, as Karen painted me as a lawless opportunist. Then it was my turn. My lawyer, a soft-spoken but razor-sharp woman named Clara, presented the 1865 grant, authenticated by the State Historical Society. She explained how it included exemptions from certain local zoning laws, a provision upheld in multiple court rulings over the decades. Clara didn't stop there. She projected the 1866 newspaper clipping on a screen, reading aloud the story of Hiram Whitaker's failed attempt to steal Ezekiel's land. The judge, a history buff himself, leaned forward, clearly captivated. "Ms. Whitaker," he said, addressing Karen, "it seems your family has a history of challenging this land's ownership. Care to comment?" Karen's face turned beet red. She stammered, claiming she didn't know about Hiram, but the damage was done. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as Clara introduced Marla, the county inspector, as a witness. Marla testified that the guest house was indeed a renovation, not a new build, and that the land grant's exemptions were still legally binding. She added, almost with a smirk, that Karen had filed 3 other complaints against neighbors in the past year, all dismissed. The crowd chuckled, and Karen sank lower in her seat. The climax came when Clara called an unexpected witness. Dr. Ellis, a local historian who'd studied Civil War land grants. He testified that Ezekiel's grant was one of only a handful in Tennessee with such robust protections, designed to reward veterans and preserve their legacy. "This land," he said, his voice booming, "is a living testament to a man who fought for this country. To challenge it is to challenge history itself." The courtroom fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Karen's lawyer tried to object, but the judge waved him off, clearly moved. Karen's case collapsed like a house of cards. The judge ruled in my favor, upholding the land grant's exemptions and dismissing Karen's complaint as baseless. He went further, ordering her to cover my legal fees as a penalty for her frivolous lawsuit. The gavel struck, and the crowd erupted in applause. Karen stormed out, her lawyer trailing behind, as neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years came up to shake my hand. One even whispered, "She's been trying to control this town for years. You did us all a favor." In the weeks that followed, Karen's reputation took a nosedive. Word of her courtroom defeat spread, and her HOA dreams fizzled as neighbors banded together to reject her proposals. The guest house stood proud, a symbol of my family's resilience, and I hosted a barbecue to celebrate, inviting everyone but Karen. As we gathered under the stars, sharing stories of Ezekiel and toasting to victory, I felt a deep connection to the land and the man who'd fought for it long ago. But the real victory wasn't just keeping the guesthouse site, was the reminder that truth and history have a way of standing tall against petty vendettas. Karen thought she could rewrite my family's story, but she didn't count on the strength of a Civil War grant or the echoes of her own ancestors' failure. Now, every time I walk past that guesthouse, I smile, knowing it's not just a building, it's a legacy unbroken. What do you think? Did Karen deserve her courtroom comeuppance? Or was she just misguided in her pursuit of neighborhood standards? Share your thoughts below.